Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the ODPP Café. My name is Anita Onuko. It's still January, so Happy New Year, and thank you once again for joining us. This is a show brought to you courtesy of the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. We are live on Facebook. We go live on YouTube. We are also on Twitter at the office at the ODPP_KE. On Facebook, we are at the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions Kenya. On YouTube, the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions Kenya. We invite you to follow us. We invite you to subscribe. Invite a friend to join us on our channels to be able to understand how the justice system works. So, like I said, this show is brought to you by the Office of the DPP, and it is to inform you, to educate you, to tell you about the criminal justice system and how it works. And of course, we always have a visitor on the show to try and give us give some details about the topic that we have today. So there is always a team. You can tweet, you can send a comment on Facebook, you can also just comment on YouTube and tell us where you are. And of course, you can be able to ask questions. We usually give a quick sneak into the courts, but not today. Today is a very special show, maybe brief. But the ODPP is going to be hosting the 16th Africa Annual General Meeting and Conference of Africa Prosecutors, APA. It's a big meeting that's going to take place in Mombasa, a conference, and it's going to have prosecutors and DPPs and AGs from across Africa. We have about 42 countries confirmed. We are going to have DPPs, AGs, state actors, non-state actors, all of whom are going to converge to talk about how to curb transnational and organized crime. So the theme of this conference is strengthening coordination and collaboration towards effective cross-border prosecution of transnational organized crime. And the event begins on 29th up to 2nd of February. We shall be live again like we are today on Facebook. You are free to join, you're free to ask questions, you're free to engage with the conference as it goes on. Like I said, there are going to be 42 countries going to be in attendance. So TOC is very interesting, and it's very engaging. So if you've watched Power, I know you have. If you've watched Locked Up, Blacklist, all these things, or The Godfather even, if you're as old as I am, you know how these things, how you've had a glimpse of how transnational and organized crime looks like. So these things are real, and our country is situated in a place in the context of where TOC happens a lot. Like most African countries, Kenya is situated strategically for trade, for economics. We are a financial and economic hub in Africa, and of course, a vibrant people, an active civil society, free media, freedom of speech, etc. It is a country that is poised to be to have enormous potential for growth and development. But like any other country, this image is always blurred by TOC. And this meeting by prosecutors is going to have this discussion about Kenya, about Tanzania, about Nigeria, about all other countries in Africa and how they can tackle TOC. Now, today, I almost said on stage, but today in studio, I have a prosecutor with immense experience in prosecuting in Kenya. And of course, he can give us a glimpse of how other African countries work. I want to introduce Mr. Mule, but I want him to also just take a few minutes to introduce himself and tell us and confirm that he's that experienced.
Thank you, Anita.
Yes.
My name is Victor Mule.
Yes.
As you have been told, I'm Acting Deputy Director of Public Prosecutions.
Yes.
In the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. Yeah. I'm in charge of County Affairs and Prosecution Services, and basically, I coordinate prosecution services throughout the country.
Meskia, experience ndio hiyo. So, Mr. Mule, the APA conference is coming up in Mombasa on Monday. It's quite a big deal. It's an important conference coming up. Important discussions are going to be taking place. And there are 5 themes. There's money laundering and asset recovery. There's the use of technology in combating TOC, transnational organized crime. There's understanding the trends of illicit financial flows. Environmental and wildlife crime. They're also considered transnational crimes to some extent. And then terrorism and terrorism financing in the 21st century. Now, before we go into the theme and to just give us an overview of the theme, tell us a bit about APA. Who or what is APA?
Thank you, Anita. Yeah. APA is an association of all prosecuting authorities in Africa. The officials of APA, that is African Prosecutors Association, are the heads of the national prosecuting authorities in each country in Africa.
Okay.
And the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions is currently the Secretary General of APA.
Okay.
And the Office of the DPP is privileged this year to host the annual general meeting of African Prosecutors Association in Mombasa, as we have been told, between 29th January and 2nd February 2023.
2023, yeah. I almost say 2022. So what was the reason APA was established? Why is it important that you have APA?
In 2003, the prosecuting authorities within Africa conceived the idea of forming the African Prosecutors Association due to the need to effectively and efficiently prosecute cross-border transnational organized crimes. You all appreciate that prosecuting authorities cannot work in isolation from one another due to the fact that nowadays crimes transcend borders. You will find that you require evidence in another country. You require a suspect in another country. You cannot get this evidence into your country and present the evidence in your courts without the assistance of another prosecuting authority in another country. You cannot get a suspect or a fugitive who is residing in another country to your country for purposes of prosecution unless there is cooperation and coordination through international cooperation through the use of an entity like the APA. So APA was conceived for effectively and efficiently prosecute cross-border and transnational organized crimes.
I like that you've explained it. You know, when we say strengthening coordination and cooperation, the way you've explained that you have a case in this country, you have to prosecute in another country, you need, it brings it to life that there's really need for strengthening coordination and cooperation. But now, for someone like me, how do I understand, how would you explain what transnational organized crime is? So when is it ever disorganized?
Transnational organized crime means a crime which is committed across borders.
Border nivuke border.
Yes, so long as it transcends several borders, it's transnational.
Yeah.
It is also organized if there is several people who have conceived the idea and formed the intention to commit offenses across the two borders. And there are very many examples which I can give. Money laundering, which is the process by which criminals disguise the source of their monies. The money is generated by criminals or through offenses is too huge, such that it has to be laundered. Because if you take it to a financial institution will raise such they do so through the use of shell companies. They transfer these monies to tax havens which are known through the world. Talk of terrorism. Terrorists move from one country to another for training. They move monies for purposes of financing terrorism. Talk of cybercrime through banks. Scheming of electronic bank cards. It's done across borders. Fraud. Talk of maritime piracy, whereby ships are pirated and then the pirates demand ransom. The ransom is not paid at the ship. It's paid across borders.
To some countries.
Through some countries. Task evasion, where importers and exporters misquote the prices in the import documents and the like. The trading in wildlife, the like, they transcend borders.
So you can't avoid not to work together.
You can't avoid not to work together.
Okay. So to what extent have we as a
communication through the airports? Kenya is very vibrant. We are very far in terms of internet connectivity, the use of internet. That's where cyber offenses come in. And then, of course, we have porous borders. We have our neighbors who don't have very good working governments, such as governance issues. So it's possible that the borders of these countries can be used to commit crimes and bring in illegally obtained goods.
So how does TOC affect me as just a Kenyan? Because when you talk about the APA conference, it feels like it's a conference for you, not for me. So why should it interest me that this is being discussed now?
Crime does not pay. That is a country which is prone to crime is obviously not going to develop in any way, and a country with crime is a demotivating factor and disincentive for foreign investors. No foreign investor wants to invest in a country where there is crime, or where they are likely to be the investment is not going to bear any fruit. So it impacts you, and it also denies some of these of the much needed resources to finance such sectors like the health sector, education, the justice sector, governance, and the like. They are not able to finance their budgets. Take, for example, tax evasion through importers and exporters misquote the prices of goods they are either importing or exporting. So access are not paid to the government. The government is denied the much important resources to finance revenue to finance its sources. So this trickles down to you now as the manager, because the government is not in a position now to provide to you the essential services, shelter, infrastructure, and the like.
So I will be affected.
Definitely, you will be affected in every aspect of your life, because you will not get quality life, which the government has got an obligation.
The theme under money laundering and asset recovery, strategies and challenges, and you've talked a bit about tax evasion. There's something here written: mutual legal assistance in recovery of assets in foreign jurisdiction. Could you kindly just give a bit of what is that? How is tell us what mutual legal assistance is, and then you can understand the need for cross-border collaboration.
Mutual legal assistance refers to the processes used by countries to obtain evidence from another country, which evidence is required by the requesting state for purposes of investigations or prosecution. I'll give an example. Let's take an example of dealing with wildlife products. A country, wildlife product like ivory is exported to Vietnam. And the source of this ivory is Kenya. And we have arrested suspects here in Kenya. And the ivory is discovered in Vietnam, for instance. I'm just giving an I'm not saying there is any ivory which has been recovered in Vietnam. Is in Vietnam. We want to prosecute these suspects with the offense of dealing in wildlife trophies. These trophies will be required in Kenya as evidence. We want it here. So we cannot just get a police officer to Vietnam to bring it back. If they go there and they start bringing it back without mutual legal assistance, they will be arrested. We want one who imported, because Vietnam has got import documents, who imported these documents to Vietnam. And we also want the ivory back so that we can use it as the expert. So we make a request to Vietnam. Each country has got, the central authority is the one which makes the request for mutual legal assistance. In Kenya, it is the Attorney General who transmits the request through the Minister of Foreign Affairs. And there are also competent authorities. These are the authorities which now deal with the prosecution. Like the Office of the DPP is a competent authority. We can prepare a request for mutual legal assistance and transmit it to Vietnam to get the ivory back and obtain any other evidence which Vietnam might have to assist Kenya in prosecution. This conference, now to bring you back to the context, the conference, we are able to establish networks. We are able to enhance cooperation amongst all African countries, such that we can obtain, for instance, Kenya can obtain evidence from any country in Africa. Should we require Tanzania? If we have no collaboration, if we don't know who is in Tanzania, if Tanzania doesn't know how the laws of Kenya are mutual, they will not return the car here.
And if you don't know who to call.
We don't know who to call.
Interesting. I'm imagining you're a prosecutor in Uganda or Tanzania and you don't know who to reach out to.
Out of this conference, we intend to build networks and enhance this cooperation, because we have come together I have the number for the
Yes.
DPP of Tanzania. I just called the DPP of Tanzania. I have this matter.
Yeah.
I have the in Tanzania.
Yeah.
It was stolen in Kenya. Please, can it be intercepted as I
Comes,
make the
yes,
request
yes.
before it is driven to Malawi?
And then you tell the Malawi guy.
Of course.
Okay. And then there's also the topic of cyber security technology. Are we as a continent ready threats that come with cybercrime? Or are we still in the discovery stage?
I would say we are halfway ready, but in terms of some of the offenses which have been committed, like through virtual currency, we don't have any regulation as yet. Most countries don't have the requisite domestic legislation, or even criminalize best practices on how to deal with cybercrime, which is an emerging crime. And cybercrime is not, virtual currency is not the only new or evolving offense in terms of cybercrime. There are many others which are coming. Card fraud, I talked about card fraud. Child bullying. How are countries dealing with child bullying? We are seeing people